This episode is brought to you by Emmanuel Acho and his legendary quote, "Proximity breeds care and distance breeds fear."
Welcome to the Stephan Dyer podcast, my people.
Hello, my people. ¿Cómo están, damas y caballeros? Welcome to the Stephan Dyer podcast, where I welcome people with remarkable stories for amazingly vulnerable conversations. I am Stephan Dyer, former banker turned comedian and lifestyle entrepreneur, and this episode with Zana or Z will be extraordinary. I've been thinking about this episode for like 2 years. Z is a project manager by day, entrepreneur at heart, and one of the greatest storytellers that I know. Z is currently working on an upcoming presentation. This is confidential information, but we want to say it to get you guys hyped. Z is currently working on an upcoming presentation, which will be a mix of storytelling, comedy, / TED Talk, and an open letter to every immigrant out there. It's a story about the hardships, culture shock, and blessing of being a refugee turned Canadian citizen, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. Today's episode will complement that revolutionary, interactive, emotional keynote, so we'll give it all we've got. If you like this episode, share it, give us a review, screenshot it on your IG stories, and tag us at Stephan Dyer and at Zana or Z. My friends, please help me welcome the unbreakable, the unmistakable, the highly capable, the invincible Zana or Z. How are you, my man?
That was incredible. Thank you. I'm doing well, sir. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here.
I'm so happy that you're here. This has been... we talked throughout the entire pandemic, and even before that, some of you know that the Continual Growth crew and my great friends Z, Blanca, Carlito, Stir, and the crew and everybody were instrumental in obviously my personal growth, but also in the fact that Malpensando teaches the public speaking through comedy courses in English. Because you guys were the first class in English that we taught, and we were so grateful. We're so happy, and now English is our main income stream.
That's amazing.
It's incredible. And then we worked with you, consulting. You helped us bring Malpensando into the corporate side. We worked with you for months throughout the pandemic, and we streamlined a whole lot of things. And then your guidance helped us work with Cody, who is now our business coach, and we've just exploded since then. So thank you again, man.
I'm super happy for you guys.
Yes, and in big ways, like I think our paths come together, not just because of the mentality, but because we're both immigrants. We're both now Canadian citizens, and we've had crazy paths that not a lot of people know about. And I think about your story every week. I'm in the car and I'm like, fuck, why isn't he here? Why haven't we done this podcast?
That's every immigrant story has components that are similar, but the overarching narrative is always kind of difficult, and it's tough. And it's only immigrants understand immigrants, but I think it's important that we talk about it more so that we can educate other people about the journey and what it's like. Definitely,
and it will allow people of all walks of life to be more grateful with what they have, but also this could be a movie. So, okay, let's step back all the way back to Kurdistan. A lot of people don't know what Kurdistan is.
Sure.
It's a part of Iraq, but can we rewind back to 1987 Kurdistan and a little bit of the context there?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Kurdish. Kurdish people, we're the largest ethnic minority in the world without our own country.
That's insane.
We're like 30, 35 million people. And since the beginning of time, we have never had our own country, our own borders. So the landmass that we would call Kurdistan, if we could claim a country, spreads across 4 countries: northern Iraq, western Iran, southern Turkey, and eastern Syria.
Wow.
So automatically, we've grown up in a world where those places, those countries, we've seen what's happened in them, right? It's been war-torn ever since I was a child. And really, the tragedy for the Kurdish people goes back far into like the early days of civilization, like thousands of years. We've always been oppressed by whatever the empire was that was dominating that part of the world. So specifically with the time period that I was born, this is where Saddam Hussein, who was a dictator in Iraq, he decided to do something that he called Arabization. So the entire Iraq landmass, he wanted the Kurds gone.
No way.
Wiped off the map. So there was a genocide that happened, and it started in 1985, 86. I was born in 1987.
What?
So when I try to think about what the world was like back then, I try to imagine what my father, who was my age now, so in his early 30s, my mom, I think she just turned 20 when I was born, right?
Wow.
So the world they lived in was dangerous, incredibly dangerous. It was dangerous to be Kurdish. It was dangerous to live your life, because there was always this onslaught or threat of the Iraqi army rolling into your village, rolling into your town, flattening the houses, capturing all the men, taking them to what are like the equivalent of concentration camps. And during that time period, I think we lost like 10 or 15 men in the family, extended, cousins and so on. And my dad was a very prideful man, very prideful. So Kurdish men, particularly, very prideful men. And they defend their land, they defend their cities, they defend their people. So my dad was a Peshmerga. So Peshmerga stands for those who face death.
Wow.
And that was our equivalent of an army. And my dad served in that army proudly for years, before I was born.
So the Peshmerga is an army of Kurdish men who defend the land.
That defend the land. They oftentimes are forced into guerrilla warfare because the weapons are outdated.
Yeah.
You're going up against an army with tanks, and all you have are AK-47s, old guns. So it was more guerrilla warfare that would happen, fighting in the mountains.
Yeah.
And around this time, there was progress being made by the Kurds against the Iraqi army, and then Saddam had enough. And then his cousin, who's known as Chemical Ali, he decided, okay, we're going to solve this Kurdish problem. So they dropped bombs, chemical bombs.
What?
Yeah, on cities all around northern Iraq. So this forced a mass exodus of people, right? So like war today, it's becoming more understood what it looks like, because for the first time, the war in Ukraine that's happening between Russia and Ukraine, we have social media, we can see what it looks like.
Yeah.
But back in 1980, there was no social media, there was no internet, right?
Yeah.
So at that time, the word was starting to spread that there was this genocide happening, and there was families that exited to the borders, right, to Turkey, to Syria, to Iran. And our family went to Iran from northern Iraq. And
this is 1987.
this is 1986, I think.
Okay.
So just before I was born, this happened. And for Kurdish people, so you have no paperwork, you can't travel, you have no passport, right? So you're an isolated, landlocked region. The countries around you aren't friendly, right? Iraq is committing a genocide against our people.
Wow.
Iran has been oppressing our people for hundreds of years. In Turkey, you're not allowed to speak Kurdish.
What?
That Kurdish identity is not allowed at that time. So, and then in Syria, Syria's probably welcoming to us, but not very well, So
Yeah.
you have this situation where, like, my dad's looking around at the world, and my dad was a very, let's say, learned man. You know what I mean? He studied philosophy, he studied world geography. He was a big fan of democracy, obviously. He didn't get to experience it growing up, but he understood that that was the right way to live. And he saw this opportunity where, okay, I can take my family out of here, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of every immigrant story where there's a decision that gets made. There's a
Yeah.
point in time where you decide, okay, we can't stay here. We don't know where we're going to go, but we have to leave.
Yeah.
So my dad saw this opportunity where, and this was starting to happen, where Kurdish refugees were trying to get to the UN offices of the surrounding countries. So to get to the UN office is a mission. If you can get to the UN office, you have a chance to claim refugee status.
Wow.
The challenge is getting to the UN office. So my dad came up with this plan, and he started to hear about different people using smugglers to bypass the borders to make it to the UN offices in the capital cities of the surrounding countries. My dad's cousin, a couple years prior, he made it to the UN offices in Ankara, Turkey, so the capital city of Turkey.
Yeah.
And from there, he was able to immigrate to Sweden, and he wrote letters back to my dad. They were very close. And he said, it's possible. It's incredibly dangerous. It's incredibly risky, but it's possible. And my dad's cousin did it solo. My dad at this time now, he's kind of working through the idea of like, do I do this? Do I take my wife, who's 21 years old, my son, who's a year and a half, and my other son, who's a baby, like 3-4 months?
Wow.
Do I take this risk to try and go from the border town in Iran to the UN offices in Turkey? Remember, Iran's a hostile government. Iraq's trying to kill Kurdish people. You can't speak Kurdish in Turkey. So I'm trying to wrap my head around how my dad decided to take this insane risk, right? Because conceptually he understood it was going to be crazy risky. I don't think he understood what was coming next when he decided, okay, it's time. And I don't know if you want me to start to go into that story.
Let's
but
go into it, man.
Okay. So
you're born...
I was born in May 1987. At this time, the genocide had been happening, and approximately 200,000 Kurdish people were murdered.
Wow.
And the ways that they were killed were terrible. Like, there was obviously, gunshot wounds, bombings, all that kind of stuff. But the most terrible way that Kurds were being murdered was through chemicals that would be dropped through these bombs. And one of the bombs, it made you laugh.
No way.
So the bomb would drop, and you imagine you have entire cities of people that come out into the streets and they're laughing, they're giggling. They can't figure out why they're laughing.
No.
And then all of a sudden they start to cough up their saliva, they start to fall over dead, and you'd have entire cities, just people just dead on the streets. And this was happening right around the time that I was born, and it happened for another year or two. And my dad saw this as the opportunity. This is where we can, if we can leave, there's a chance we can make it. So he decides, I'm going to find out how to get to the UN offices in Ankara from Iran. So my dad was very connected.
Because at this time you're in Iran?
We're in Iran. We're staying in like a border town between Iran and Iraq. Very much like a refugee situation.
And in Iran there, Iraq is not dropping bombs. So,
No.
So you had already...
But there was a war going on between Iraq and Iran.
Wow.
So so the conflict between Iraq and Iran started in 1980.
Yeah.
So at this time, Saddam's fighting this war with his neighboring country.
Yeah.
He sees that the Kurds are partnering with Iran in the north. So that's what drove him to start the genocide.
Wow.
He said, okay, if these people want to partner with my enemy, then they are my enemy, and I'm going to wipe them off the map. So that's when the genocide happened. That's when we lost 200, 300,000 people.
That's incredible.
So we're at this border town in Iran, and my dad had been saving up for years, right? He knew that there would come a day when there would be a chance for him to leave, and he's always thought about leaving. Remember, he's a learned man. He knew that there was a world outside of here that he could raise his kids in.
Yeah.
So he said, I'm going to take this risk, and he met a smuggler who would smuggle people over the border into Turkey. And the first thing that the smuggler said to him is, do you have $3,000 US? So $3,000 US in 1980 is a lot of money anywhere in the world.
Money. Still a lot of money.
Still a lot of money. But back then it was impossible to have that amount of money, right? So my dad had been saving for years, he said. He told me he saved for like 10 years. Before I was born, before he met my mom, he had been saving, knowing that this day potentially might come. So the smuggler said, do you have $3,000 US? And my dad said, yes, I have it. He said, okay, You're going to meet 3 other families at the edge of this specific city, and we're going to embark on this journey.
Wow.
So my dad showed up, and the other men that were there, they weren't former soldiers. These were regular men. One of them was a doctor. Another one was like a barber. These are regular city people, right? And then my dad,
was a comedian,
maybe
like
might have been, but my dad was the only former soldier there. So the men congregated, the families congregated, and they're waiting for the smugglers to come. So the smugglers say to them, okay, you're going to meet us in this border town near the border of Iran and Turkey.
Yeah.
And when you get there, we're going to take the women and children over the border wearing UN jackets. So arriving at the border, you automatically get sent to the refugee camp.
Yeah.
But to get to that town, it was a crazy journey, because there was checkpoints all along the way. They didn't let Kurds come to the refugee camp.
Not UN checkpoints,
No,
but like
no.
hostile.
Hostile Iran, Iraq, Turkey, because there was this
People with
wave of
guns.
people. Yeah, there was a wave of people leaving their cities because there was a genocide happening, right? Millions of people. So they wanted to contain them around the border towns. That's where they set up all the refugee camps. If you show up at the border towns, you get automatically sent to the refugee camp, and there's no leaving. That's it. It's like a prison, right? There's no leaving. So you have to get past this big barrier of getting past the refugee camps
to be able to go into the UN.
to go to the capital city, to make it to the UN building to claim refugee status.
Oh my God.
So you're in a refugee camp, but you're not a refugee. You can't claim refugee status until you make it to the UN office.
Yeah.
If you're in the refugee camp, you can't leave to go to the UN office. So my dad got a smuggler to help our family make it to the UN office.
In Ankara, Turkey.
In Ankara, Turkey. And this is where the story really starts. So this is just to give the context of the type of world that was happening at that time. So my dad rented a horse, or I guess he bought the horse because you can't rent, right?
Yeah.
So he bought a horse, and he put my mom on the horse. He wrapped my baby brother around his chest. He wrapped myself around his back,
Yeah.
so with towels and bed sheets and stuff. And
And we gotta show the tattoo here.
sure,
So people can
contextualize what's happening.
visualize it.
Yeah, so this is my dad. This is my mom. This is me. This is my baby bro. That's the horse. And this is the journey from this part of the world to make it to Turkey, which is above here.
That's incredible. Mm-hmm. Where's Kurdistan again?
So this is Kurdistan right here. It doesn't exist on a map, but this is what it would look like.
And Ankara, where is
Ankara is up here where Turkey is. This is Iran. This is Iraq. And this is Syria.
Do you have any like vague idea how many kilometers that may be?
So the walk that they had to do from that town, like the town where they met all the other families,
Yeah?
to make it to the border town where the smugglers were waiting for them, that walk took 3 days.
Just to get to where
Yes.
the other families were.
Yes.
Wow.
So the families, there was like a convoy, you can imagine, right? You have men and women married. They each probably have 2 or 3 kids, ranging from babies to maybe 7 or 8 years old.
Yeah.
And there was, I think, 4 families, right? So we're talking about maybe 15, 16 people traveling in a convoy.
Yeah.
And they had horses. The women were on the horses. The men walked. And my dad was the only one that was in the army that knew the mountains really well, right? So they started traveling. They started walking. And I think it was about the first night, my dad realized that the men that I'm traveling with aren't men that know how to travel in nature. They're city people,
Yeah.
right? They didn't bring blankets. They brought like some biscuits, but they didn't bring food, right? Whereas my dad on our horse had lots of blankets. He had $20,000 in gold.
What?
$20,000 in gold, yeah. So remember, back in this time,
He's prepared.
he's prepared. Oh yeah, he knew that this was going to be a crazy journey, right? So he had $20,000 in gold, and I think he had 1,500 US cash. Sorry, 3,000 cash on him to give to the smuggler. So the journey starts. They're walking through the mountains, and dangerous, but it's relatively safe.
Yeah.
Because they're bypassing the checkpoints through all these shepherds' paths. So the shepherds that have the sheep and all that, they would follow their paths into the rare parts of the mountain. And the first night, my dad realized, okay, I need to step up and lead, because this is going to be like these families aren't going to make it. They're not prepared for this. So the very first night, my dad took blankets, clothes off of our horse and put them on the families. He set up a fire. He's trying to like take care of these people, right? So my dad is a natural leader.
Yeah.
Just the way that he's always been. So he started to realize, okay, we're not going to make it unless I step up and lead. So then the next day they packed everything up. They started walking again. This carried on for another, I think, 24, 48 hours. They reached a part in the journey where it was a really muddy road, really muddy. And my mom's shoes got stuck in the mud. And so she couldn't walk anymore. The shoes were like, they fell off.
Yeah.
And then my dad hoisted her onto the horse. They walked for a little bit longer. And then my mom's feet started to get cold.
Oh my God.
So he's like, I can't let my wife freeze. So they stopped the convoy, and my dad walked into the mountains, hoping to find a pair of shoes.
What?
Like this, it's just crazy to think that you could even think like that, right? So he started walking. He found a woman's shoe, left shoe, no laces, and a man's like sandal or something, right? He brought them back. He wrapped blankets or sheets around the sandal to make it kind of like a shoe. And then he took apart the sheet to make laces for the other shoe, put that on my mom's feet. We started going again. We're going. And then somewhere in the front of the convoy, one of the women fell off of their horse, cracked her head open.
No.
Cracked her head open. And my dad's at the back of the convoy, right? And my dad's thinking was, let me be at the back. I'm the only one that has a gun.
Yeah.
And so my dad had it's called an FN7 gun. It says like a semi-automatic pistol, right? He was the only one that had one. So he was at the back. He said, I'll protect us from the back. Hopefully from the front, they'll be okay. They start screaming, crying. They don't know what to do. Her head's split open. She's bleeding everywhere, right? So my dad's like, what the fuck are we going to do? Like, how are we going to solve this? Like, she could die here. So they bandaged her up. They pressured on her head to try and stop the bleeding. And then my dad said, okay, men, come here. They started smoking cigarettes, right? And my dad's telling me the story, and I'm like, what? Why would you smoke cigarettes? What the hell are you doing? When my dad was like 4 or 5 years old, he had an accident where like his head also split open, and he remembered that the men grabbed cigarette ashes.
No.
And they spit into the cigarette ashes in their hands to make it kind of like a paste, and then they closed the woman's wound.
What?
Yeah, they closed the woman's...
MacGyver shit.
Yeah. They closed the woman's wound. The bleeding stopped. She's okay. Let's go again. They go again. So now we're back on the road, and I think we're just arriving into the town, very close to the town where we're going to meet the smugglers, right?
Yeah.
And on the way, we encounter a Peshmerga group of men. And these Peshmerga men, like, they're very careful to turn Kurds back, because they know if you go to the refugee camp, your life's going to be hell. It's better for you to go back. So they're approaching the convoy, and then...
Peshmerga is friendly to them because your dad is a Peshmerga, right?
Right, but they're friendly to Kurds in general because they're defending the Kurds, right?
Yeah.
So this convoy is approaching, and the Peshmerga say, whoa, who's in charge here? Who's in charge here?
So your dad steps up.
And then everybody points to the back, and then here's my dad walking down the road, right? The Peshmerga men are looking at my dad. The number 2 guy in charge recognizes my father.
Wow.
And he says, I know this man. This is a good man. I know this man. And then, so remember, this is like 3 days in. People are starting to get hungry. People are starting to get, it's getting tough.
Yeah.
Right? So the Peshmerga men said, okay, come, families. We're going to feed you guys. We're going to make sure you're okay. What's the plan? They said to my father. My dad said, we're going to meet these smugglers, and they're going to take us to the UN head offices in Ankara, Turkey. And the Peshmerga man said, are you sure? A lot of these smugglers sell families to the Turkish army.
Whoa.
And he said, well, I didn't really think about that. And he's like, we're going to meet your smuggler. Yeah. They said, we're going to meet your smuggler. So the next day, we now arrive at the border town. It was probably just like maybe 30-minute, 1 hour distance away. We meet the smugglers. They have the UN SUVs, decoy SUVs. These aren't real SUVs, UN SUVs, but they're labeled UN. They have the UN vests.
Like not UN bootleg.
Bootleg, yeah, bootleg, yeah. Because if you show up at the border in a UN SUV, they'll let you in, but only if you have women and children in the car.
Oh.
So the smugglers, now they come with my dad. The Peshmerga men said to the men, to the smuggler, "You're going to make sure that this man and his family get to the UN building." And he said, "Oh, I had every intention of doing that." He's like, "No, I'm going to make sure you get them there." So he said to my dad, "How much are you paying this man to take you there?" And he said, $3,000 US. And my dad was smart. He knew not to give the smuggler the money up front. He said, "I'll give it to you when I cross the gate into the UN office." And the smuggler said, "Yeah, I'll get him there. No worries." He said, "No." I said to my dad, "You have $3,000? Give me half." So my dad gave the Peshmerga soldier $1,500 US. And the Peshmerga said to the smuggler, "You're going to get this man to the UN offices. He's going to give you $1,500 US at that time, and then you're going to come and see me, and I'll give you the other $1,500.
Wow.
Right? So the smuggler said, "Okay, no problem. That's okay." So the women and children got piled into the SUVs. So you have to think it's like, what, 7-seater SUVs?
Yeah.
There's women and children. There's probably 15 of them, maybe.
That's insane.
They get taken over the border, and the story is, we are from the UN. These women and children are sick. We're going to take them to a UN hospital. So they get taken over the border. No problem. All good. The men, here's where the challenge is. You can't show up at the Turkish border if you're a man, because automatically they're going to assume you're a Peshmerga, and they're going to arrest you and probably kill you.
The border with Turkey.
Border with Turkey. So my dad and the 3 other men, they had to sneak over the border, 3-day walk between military checkpoints, right?
That's insane.
And he said the first night was okay. The second night they were in water up to their chest, trying to cross this river. And then they hear bombs. Bullets.
What?
Bullets starting to splash against the water around them. And it's nighttime. So all the men got under the water, and they had to be super quiet. And slowly but surely, they somehow made it past that very scary moment.
Your dad included?
Dad included. And my dad was the only one that had a pistol. And my dad, he said to me, he said, "I carried that pistol because if someone tries to kill me, I'm going to kill him first." Right? So now their daytime comes. It's on the 3rd day. They had to get to the other side of that border for the border town that's on that side to meet their families. And I'm trying to imagine your wife and child. You put them in a car at a border going to a country where they're not welcome to speak a language they're not allowed to speak, right? Imagine doing that.
I can't.
For 3 days, my dad no phone, no communication with my mom, with the smugglers to know if the families are okay. It was just a giant gamble. Gambling his life, gambling his family's life. But that's the risk that these men took, because they said, this is the only way. We have to get to the UN offices. So they made it over. They found the women and children, the UN vehicles. They were by a beach. And the story was that they were vacationing, and the UN was supervising them. Right? So they're now vacationing at the beach. It's the first time you're seeing your wife, your kids. You made it. You made it into Turkey.
Yeah.
Big accomplishment.
Big win.
Most people didn't make it this far. You got turned back, right? Or you got captured. So now they're at this beach area. Another 2 vehicles come, right? And they take us, I think it was like a 6-hour drive to the outskirts of Ankara.
Still, these vehicles are part of the smugglers?
Part of the smugglers,
okay.
Yeah. Part of the smugglers. So we get to the edge of Ankara, and then the smugglers say, "Okay, we're going to get you guys a taxi. The taxi is going to take you right to the UN gate. The second you arrive at the UN gate, you claim you refugee status, and they'll let you in." And the smuggler said to my dad, "Okay, give me the money." My dad said, no, I'm not giving you the money. The deal is you get me to the UN gate. Until you get me to the UN gate, I'm not giving you anything. So remember, the smuggler hasn't gotten any money yet.
Wow.
He thinks he's going to get 1,500 from my pops when we get to the UN gate, and he has to go back and find those Peshmerga soldiers to get the other 1,500.
Yeah.
Right? So the smuggler said, okay, then I have to come with you then. And my dad said, I don't care. I don't care what you do from this point forward, but I'm getting to that UN gate. If you get me there, I'll give you the $1,500. So taxis come, they take everybody to the gate. Everybody crosses the gate,
Wow.
claim refugee status, and now my dad through the gate gave the smuggler the 1,500
Through the gate.
through the gate. Yeah,
This is like a movie.
it's a movie. It is a movie. He gave him the 1,500. Oh, and I forgot a crucial part of the story. Remember that pistol that my dad had?
Yeah.
You can't walk around Turkey with a pistol. Okay, so just when we got to the other side, the border town on the other side, my dad recognized someone in the village just randomly. Just randomly recognized
Turkey side?
On the Turkey side.
Wow.
And he recognized the man. He said, you know my brother? And he's like, yeah, I know your brother. Give him this. And weapons were hard to get back then. So my dad wanted to make sure that pistol made it back to my uncle.
That's incredible.
So he gave the pistol to the guy that he knew, and the guy gave it back. So now we're at the border gate, the UN gate. My dad gave him the 1,500. The smuggler left. We arrive, and everybody at the UN office spoke Turkish or Dutch.
No.
Nobody spoke Kurdish. My dad was the only one that spoke Arabic and some Farsi, which is the language of Iran.
Yeah.
My dad refused to speak to the Arabic translator out of principle. He said, people that speak your language want to kill us because of who we are. I'll refuse to speak your language.
What?
And my dad was a very prideful man. Remember, I told him,
Yes.
very prideful. So he said, I refuse to speak your language. And the translators were, the people at the UN were trying to communicate. It wasn't really getting through.
Yeah.
But my dad was blown away by the humanity of these people. You have these hungry families that show up at your gate. You can't speak to them. The language isn't translating. They gave them food. They gave them tea. They gave them showers. First time showering in maybe a week.
Wow.
Right? So my dad was blown away by that, and he said, okay, this is good. This is good news. I'm starting to make the dream come true, right?
It feels like safe, not,
Feels safe.
not walking around everywhere.
Feel safe, yeah. So the UN, they filed the paperwork and everything, and then they got everybody apartments around the UN offices. And
including your family.
including
So
our family.
The
yeah.
four of you.
Yeah, so there was 4 families, and I think they got us 4 apartments, all near each other.
Yeah.
And a couple of days go by, the Turkish officials, they call and they say, okay, you've claimed refugee status, you're allowed to stay here, it's legal. The men need to come into the office to grab identification so that you can stay. And my dad was like, only the men? That seems weird. What about the women and children? And they said, oh, we'll take care of them after, but for now, can we just get the men to come? So the 4 men, plus I think it was like 6 or 7 other men from another convoy,
Yeah.
all showed up at this Turkish office at the same time to pick up their ID. Instantly, all arrested.
What?
All arrested. Yeah.
Including your dad?
Including my dad. All of them arrested on site. So this was a Thursday. The Friday was a holiday. You're not going to see a lawyer or a judge until Monday. My dad, someone in that convoy, and he doesn't know who, but somebody in that convoy said that this man's a Peshmerga.
Get the fuck
So
out.
they took my dad separate from everybody, put him in solitary confinement, and he got tortured.
No.
Yeah, he said he had his hands tied to like a ceiling bar or something. His hands are tied above him, and they whipped him in the back with these cables. Still, before he died, he had these slashes on his back.
What?
Yeah. So I think it was like, it must have been a few hours had gone by now, and my mom's getting worried. Oh, where's the men? Like, what's going on here? The next morning, the soldiers, the Turkish soldiers, remember, they're not feeding these people. They see Kurdish people as less than human,
Yeah.
right? They let one of the men go, and they say, I think they gave him maybe $30 or something, enough to buy some food for everyone. They said, go buy food and come back.
Sorry, so who gave $30 to who?
The soldiers, the Turkish soldiers who are arresting the men,
Yeah.
let one of the men go, gave him some money to buy food, and said, come back. if you don't come back, we're killing all these men.
Oh my god.
So this is now what's happening. My dad's in solitary confinement. He has no idea what's going on. This man that got released, he said, okay, I have a very small window to go to the market, get some food for these men and come back. I'm going to run to one of the women's houses and tell them what's going on.
Yeah.
He ran to my mom's apartment. So my mom's 20 years old. Young child, 4 months old. Me, I was like 2 and a bit years old. She finds out her husband, who is her only like rock.
You're like Liam's age.
Yeah, 100%. And she finds out that my dad and all the men had been arrested. So my mom went to the UN office and said to them, all the men have been arrested. You need to free them. And my mom's panicking, right? She's in hysterics, right? The UN officers couldn't make it to the jail until Monday. So for 3 days they had to stay there. Yeah, for 3 days. And then finally they released them. They got it sorted out, and the UN said, these people are refugees. This is illegal. You're not allowed to do this. Like, UN rights. It doesn't matter what your country says. UN rights. These are allowed to be here, right?
Yeah.
So my dad got released. All the other men got released. And they got their IDs. Now they can roam freely in the country. So
your dad's bitter by this point because he's been tortured.
But he's also a man on a mission. I'm gonna get my family to a better life. Yeah, I don't care what happens to me. I'm gonna make this happen.
He's been in battle too for years.
Hardened.
So
Hardened man, right? So I think like a month goes by, and the U.S. or the Turkish government was giving each family $250 US a month, right? Which is like enough to cover your groceries and your rent, but that's it. Now my mom, she's 21 years old now, right?
Yeah.
Her world is completely shattered. She has no family nearby. She can't speak the local language because she doesn't know Turkish. She's not allowed to speak Kurdish. She's isolated.
And, 2 kids.
And 2 kids.
Just having 2 kids.
2 kids, yeah. So she started to not do well mentally.
Oh my god.
And then my mom fell into like a deep depression. And she needed medication. Now, mind you, the government's giving $250 US. The medication was $150.
Wow.
How can you afford this? It's not possible. So my dad said, okay, I have to find a way to make money. I have to find a way. I don't know how, but I have to find a way.
With that ID, was that like could he work? Or the idea is just you can be in the country but not work?
You can just be in the country, you can't work.
Wow.
So he has to find a cash job.
Yes.
Right? So my dad, he said he roamed around the city for days, talking to each vendor, each store.
In Turkish?
In Turkish. Can I work for you? And his Turkish was very broken, but it was enough that he could get by, you know? And he's trying to find a job. He can't find one. Nobody would hire him because they knew he wasn't Turkish. If he's not Turkish because his language isn't solid, he must be Kurdish. And if he's Kurdish, he's scum. So I don't want him in my office. I don't want him in my business. I don't want him to do anything with me. So my dad was in like this like town square area, right? And there was a bunch of men just like sitting by a fountain. They looked like they had just worked a long day, right? And they were fruit vendors. You know, back home they have those vendors that walk around with the fruits and veggies. That's what they had been doing all day. And my dad's like, I can do this job. Like, let me try and find someone. So he asks the men, like, who's in charge? There's a man that's in charge. His name's Ismail, right? And if you've ever read the book, The Alchemist.
Yes.
Remember how along the journey he encounters situations and people that help him get to the end destination? This was that moment for my pops. He encounters this man, Ismail. And he said to him, I need a job. I need to feed my family. My wife is sick. I'll do anything, any job. It doesn't matter. And the man said, I'm not really looking for people, and this is broken Turkish, right?
Wow.
And then my dad said to the man, look, if you pay these men that work for you $100, I will do the exact same job they do. You pay me $20. And Ismail's like, that's a good deal. I'll take that deal. So
knows a good deal when he sees it.
Yeah. So then the next day my dad showed up, and I think on average the vendors were moving like, let's say 2 to 3 crates of fruits and veggies a day. My dad was doing 10.
What?
He was hustling. He's like, if this is my way of feeding my family, I'm going to be the best. I'm going to do the best possible job. So him and Ismail start to get to know each other. Turns out Ismail's Kurdish.
What?
Yes. Remember, they're not allowed to speak Kurdish to each other because you're not allowed to speak it in public.
But Ismail can see a Kurdish from a distance, and he knows.
He knows. He's like, maybe this guy's a Kurd, maybe he's not. But it's a risk to speak Kurdish to someone because what if they're not? And really, they're Turkish. Then they tell the government that you spoke Kurdish. That could destroy you.
And your dad sounds like a guy that he can tell a Kurdish from a non-Kurdish.
Yeah.
Maybe he knew.
I don't know.
But he couldn't know.
My dad said he couldn't tell with this guy.
So physically, Kurdish and Turkish could look the same.
Could very similar.
Like
yeah.
you could
I could
you
be a Kurd.
Turkish?
I could be Turkish. I could be Iranian. I could be Syrian.
Okay.
Yeah, I could be Iraqi, but we're Kurds. And so Ismail said to my dad, they were talking. He said, "Man, you work hard. You work really hard." And my dad slipped and said something like, "Oh, it's we're Kurds. We're hardworking people." He said, "We're hardworking people. It's by nature." And he's like, and then Ismail pulled my dad to the side and he said, "Are you Kurdish?" And he said, "Yeah, I am. Are you?" And he said, "I am." So they went and had a private conversation away from all the other workers who are Turkish, right? And at this time, remember, my dad's doing, like, he's making $100 a day, but Ismail's taking 80, right? Because of the arrangement that they had. Suddenly, Ismail's like, "You're Kurdish. I'm going to give you a little extra money." And my dad's like, "No, we had a deal. We honor that deal."
Wow.
Right? So Ismail's like, "Okay, fine. If you're not going to take money, then I'm going to send you home with fruits and veggies every day. You take them home to your wife, and you help all the other Kurds that you know in that apartment complex." I said, "Okay, no problem." So this went on for like a few weeks, and then there was one day Ismail had bought like really sour grapes, and he didn't know if he could sell them, right? And my dad's like, "Give them to me, I'll sell them." So he took all of the grapes, he sold them. I think it was like $1,500 worth that he had to cover for Ismail to make his money back, because nobody would buy these grapes. They were too sour. So my dad sold them on the outskirts of the city.
This is a lot of grapes.
Oh, a lot of grapes.
$100 worth of grapes in 1990?
I think it was like 3 trucks of grapes. So my dad sat on a highway and just was selling grapes to people all day. He sold the $1,500 US in grapes, and then there was like a $500 profit, which is a lot of money back then. A lot of money. He goes to give Ismail the money, and Ismail takes his $1,500, and he's like, "Okay, here's the $500 profit's yours." And I was like, "No, we had a deal."
What?
He said, "We have a deal."
This is a man of principle.
He's like, "I made you $500. Our deal is every 100, I take 20. So give me $100. He said, "Okay, no problem." Ismail gave my dad the tomatoes. He gave some tomatoes and some other veggies, and inside of it, he snuck an envelope with $500 USD cash. My dad takes it home, gives it to my mom. My mom opens the bag. "What is this envelope?" And my dad's like, "It's not ours. Give it to me." So my dad went the next day, gave it back to Ismail, and he said, "We are men of principle.
What?
We had a deal. We had a handshake deal. I want to honor that deal. Here's the money back." And that was when the relationship between Ismail and my dad evolved. It was like, okay, this guy is very honorable, right? And remember, at that time, because it's a cash-based business, a lot of Ismail's vendors are stealing from him.
100%.
100%. You know they are. But my dad never took one penny extra. So then they started to build this bond. They started to become friends. And then I think 6 months had gone by, and my dad's doing great. Like, $20 a day back then was still a lot of money.
Yeah.
He's covering the medicine that my mom needed. She's starting to feel better. He's taking care of us. And then I think it was probably 6 months now we're in Ankara.
This is like 1991?
This is like 1990.
90, okay.
1990. My dad gets a phone call from back home. Well, I guess he didn't get a phone call. He called back home. There's no cell phones, right?
Yeah.
So he called
or a letter?
They were sending letters back and forth, but phones started to become more popular.
Yeah.
Right? There was like a shared phone for an entire block.
Yeah.
Right?
And expensive.
So my dad finally got on the phone, talked to my uncle, and he found out that his dad passed away.
Oh, man.
So imagine this burden, right? My dad was the oldest son. In other parts of the world, if the father dies, the oldest son becomes the next patriarch.
Yes.
And he's now not there to support his family. He took this crazy risk to get his family to another country, right? Now, all along this is happening, the UN is trying to facilitate visas for families to go to different parts of the world. Some families were going to Sweden. Some families were going to the UK, Germany, USA. My dad got a letter from his cousin and said, try to get to Canada. Canada is the best country on earth. And he's saying this from Sweden. Sweden's a good country.
Yeah.
And he's saying, get your family to Canada. And it was impossible. Canada wasn't giving out visas to refugees at that time. It was like very rare. So my dad, after working the entire day, each day for Ismail, he would go to the UN office and he would translate for them. He's starting to learn Turkish. He's starting to understand like how to help. So he would show up
volunteering before it was popular.
Yeah, man. So he would go to the UN office and he would volunteer. And his thinking was, let me help them with their job. They'll get to like me. And then if I ask for a specific country, they'll give it to me.
Yeah.
So he was like a smart man.
Strategic.
Yeah, very strategic. So he's showing up every day, translating. And eventually they said, okay, we can give you a visa to Sweden. Do you want to go? My dad said, nah. He said, nah, I'm going to bet that we can get to go to Canada.
What?
So remember, his life is hard. He's showing up every day to be a fruit vendor in a country that he's not allowed to speak the language that is his mother tongue, trying to make money to support his family. And in the evenings, he goes to the UN office to translate, to try and get some goodwill with the people.
Did you ever ask your dad, like, dude, you got Sweden. Why did you say, what does he say?
I had a mission. And so that's something that I've learned from him is like, if you set a goal in your mind and you know exactly why you want to go there, because that why needs to be powerful.
That's so powerful.
So he said, I'm going to get my kids to Canada because that's the best place in the world for them to grow up, to get an education, and to have a better life. So Sweden offered citizenship. No, didn't take it. USA offered citizenship. Didn't take it.
What?
And so a few more months go by. And then, remember, the genocide's still happening all this time. So the world's government started to say, okay, we need to bring these people in. Like, we have to bring them in.
Yeah.
So the Canadian representative at the UN offices also spoke Farsi, which is Persian, the Iranian language. My dad and her got to know each other really well because he would always show up and help translate.
Yeah.
So the one day came, she said, we can get you to Canada.
Wow.
We can get you to Canada. You have 5 days. You need to go and do all these tests, and then you need to show up at the Istanbul airport. And I was like, oh, shit. We did it. It's finally happening, right?
Yeah.
So my dad went, and the next day to work, he showed up to tell Ismail, hey, Ismail, I'm going. We got the call. We're going to Canada. And Ismail broke down in tears. And he said, you're like a brother to me. I still don't know who you are. You showed up out of nowhere. You've helped me in my business. You've helped all of us learn how to really work.
Yeah.
You taught us how to really work. And Ismail said to my dad, okay, here's this $1,000. Take this with you. It's a gift from me to you for all the work that you've done for us. And my dad's like, you don't understand. We had a deal. Still this man's principle based. He's like, no, we had a deal. We had a deal. So he said to my dad, no, I'm not taking this money. And my dad said, Ismail said to my dad, you're going to take this money. You have to take this money. It would be insulting for me if you don't take this money. And I said, okay, fine. If that's how it's going to be, then I'll take it. So we did a bunch of tests. We showed up at the airport. They flew us into Canada. What day did we come to Canada? October 31st, 1991. October 31st is Halloween.
Halloween.
I remember my dad looked around. He said, what the fuck country did we come to? Imagine you're at the airport, right? 2 years of fucking hell. After 10 years of war, right? And you finally arrive at the destination that you thought was going to be the best country in the world, and you're seeing people dressed as witches. They're dressed as all the Halloween costumes, right?
Pumpkins
and so
Frankenstein.
What the fuck country did we come to, right? And they had to explain to him what it is. He said, okay, fine. And then we arrived at the house that was going to be our house in Regina, Saskatchewan.
Wow.
Yeah. And we arrived there, and it was the first time that like my dad finally said like, I made it.
We're safe.
We're safe, right? And we arrived, and that's kind of the journey of coming to Canada.
Oh my God, man! Did your dad ever see Ismail again?
No. He never saw him again. I even when I learned this story from my pops, the details of it, I asked him like how did this all, like, how could you do this? How could you do this? Like, you put your family, kids and wife into a SUV with a smuggler that you don't even know to cross a border into a hostile country, hoping that you can meet up with them 3 days later. You arrive at the capital city, the UN building, you get arrested for 3 days, tortured. You had to walk around to find a job. Somehow you found a job. Somehow you met this man, Ismail, that like basically saved us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he said to me, he's like, the last thing I said to Ismail is, you saved our family. You saved us. You're a brother to me. Anything you need ever, I'm here for you. And Ismail said, you did more for me than I could ever do for you. And they shook hands. And apparently, I think my dad found out a couple years later that Ismail had died.
Wow.
And that's just a tragic story, but it's just wild to me that like I could never imagine doing this. You know what I mean? Like, it's just impossible.
Like, the one thing I will say, and I never can even fathom what he went through, is that I would do the same for Liam, you know?
Yeah.
It's just it's hard to even put it into words, but the stress, the agony, of not knowing, the uncertainty. But I feel like in that fight or flight, you're just executing. This man is on a mission. This man is on a mission, and he's been, I'm not saying mentally preparing for it, but he's been in battle.
Oh yeah.
Executing this whole time, defending Kurdistan.
Yep.
So obviously not a walk in the park for any measure.
No.
But this guy's been executing and leading for years now.
Oh yeah.
So maybe the other families would have died.
It's possible.
Had he not been clearly the lady who broke her head.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. And even my dad always used to say, he's like, you have to accept your reality. Whatever it is, you have to accept it, right?
Yeah.
When we were in the mountains walking, right? He knew that fucking sucked.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. What can I do about it? I have to get my family to the UN offices. Every challenge that he ever encountered, my dad always used to say, like, okay, it is what it is. This is my reality. Now what? Now what do I do? Do I sit here and complain like these other people and hope that things change?
Yeah.
Or do I go and do something about it? And my dad was always the type to go and do something about it. You know what I mean? And that's translated into me. Like,
yeah,
you've known me for a couple of years. Like,
yeah,
I don't complain. I'm very, very happy to be in this country. I'm very grateful to be in this country.
Yeah.
A tough day for me. Is it really that tough? Comparatively, you know?
I know, and it's hard to. It's very hard to balance is a hard day in Canada actually a hard day, because you contrast it to what your dad went through.
Yeah.
And I have those days too where I'm like, man, it's hard. I'm in debt, or I owe this money or whatever, but I could be so much worse in Costa Rica or in Latin America, or maybe if I never. But the thing is, that's not my reality anymore. Like, you don't live there anymore. No. So it fucks with your head to be comparing your present to a potential past, because it's not there.
Oh yeah.
Now, it's good perspective, but if that's what a lot of people don't understand, is like it's a very thin line, and it fucks you up mentally when you come to Regina, let's say Saskatchewan, and then you're like, oh, I should be grateful for everything that I have because I didn't have this at home. So you're great. You're stuck in cleaning jobs, cleaning floors. Which there's nothing wrong with that, obviously.
No,
but
it's tough.
But I do find, whereas us as immigrants, sometimes we get stuck in the I should be grateful for this minimum wage, versus like, I fucking deserve better, and I'm smart and I should go fucking get it, and this is my country too. how was that transition for all of you? Because it'll fuck you up mentally to be in war.
Oh yeah.
And then to risk everything for your family.
Mm-hmm.
And then literally the safest place on earth. And your mind is so used to dealing with threats.
Yes.
And in survival mode.
Oh yeah.
That it is very easy to fall into depression because you got no tigers to kill.
Very true. Very true.
How was that transition for your mom, for your dad, and maybe for yourselves? Although because of your age, maybe it was slightly easier. I don't know.
Yeah. No. It's. I think we all had different challenges, right? So it's 1991, 1992. You finally arrive in Canada. You have refugee status.
Yeah.
You're not permanent when you're refugee status, right? There's still a long road to become a Canadian citizen. So for my dad, it was automatic. I need to go get a job, right? And my dad worked all the tough jobs in this country. His very first job in Canada, he was a dishwasher, washing dishes for maybe $5 an hour.
Yeah.
Right? Never complained once, right? And growing up, my dad always had, like, he was a pizza delivery driver. He would deliver flyers to houses. Like
Here?
In Canada. Yeah. And eventually he became a cab driver, like a lot of immigrants.
Yes.
And he worked that job for the majority of my, like, childhood. He was a cab driver.
In Regina or in London?
In London, Ontario, yeah.
So you moved to London a little later?
Yeah, we moved, I think it was 6 months after we lived in Regina. They were starting to hear, like, there's more Kurds in Ontario. We should be in Ontario. We don't know anybody in this country. We don't even know the language.
Did you ever find any Peshmergas here?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
A couple of them made it here, and you know, these men are, like, they've been to war together. They are bonded by this insane journey that they took to bring their families here. So they all looked out for one another.
And it'll fuck you up. Like, I hear a lot of these stories of people going to war in Afghanistan and Iraq and all these places, and they go back to the US, and you'd think that they'd be depressed in war, but when they go back to society, they're more depressed.
Yeah.
And they feel like they're failing their brothers and sisters in battle for not being there.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if your dad and these Peshmergas went through the same thing, where if his dad passed away and they're still going on genocide or war, they'd be like, I should fucking be there, not washing these fucking dishes.
And that does destroy you as an immigrant that comes from a war-torn region. So, like, for my dad, I can imagine it must have been incredibly difficult, right? Yeah. Incredibly difficult. Because even when we got here, you're watching the news back home of what's happening, and there's uprisings. There's still the genocide happening. All his brothers are Peshmergas, so they're out there literally facing death every day. So for him, it weighed on him heavily, because it's like, I'm not there. I should be there, but I have to be here because I took this crazy risk for my family. Yeah. So I remember my dad used to always say that, like, anytime he got like $500 or $1,000, he would send it back home, and we didn't have extra money. You know what I mean? Like, we grew up so poor. Like, I remember up until I was 17, just poor, very poor. Right. And I was 5 years old when we landed in Canada. Right.
In London.
And I remember one of the first. I think it was the first day that I went to school. I'm the oldest son, right? And I remember my dad dressed me up, dropped me off at the school, and my mom and dad both came to the school. And my mom was in tears, right? She's crying because, like, in her mind, this is the end of the movie, right? Yeah. The crazy risk. My kid's going to school in Canada. He's gonna learn English. He's going to be with...
like Harvard to her.
It's Harvard, yeah. It's the pinnacle of education for her. So she's in tears, and my dad looked to me and he said, I want you to remember something. I want you to remember two things. Never forget the journey that we took to get here. Yeah. You are being given a gift to be in this country. And never forget your last name. Shit. So for me, I had this insane pressure all growing up to accomplish something in this country. Yeah. And if you come here as a first generation immigrant, we don't have uncles here that have jobs that they can give us, or businesses. We don't have a network. We are still learning the language when we're growing up. We have to get an education that we can't afford. None of us can afford it,
Yeah.
right? We all graduate in debt, right?
Yeah.
And I had this insane drive to make something of myself in this country, right? But all the while I had this, what they call survivor's guilt.
Oh, that's what I was gonna say.
And that destroyed me for a long time. Even today, I still have moments where I'm like, how come we made it? How come our family made it and not all the thousands of others that got turned back or were killed or like, how come us, right? And I really don't know the answer to that question. The only thing I know is that, like, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my pops.
Yeah.
That guy's fucking crazy. He's fucking crazy because no sane person takes these risks without being crazy, right? And for me, I knew that he gave me that gift. So it's kind of like, you know, I'm a big basketball fan. He gave me an alley-oop.
Yeah.
All I had to do was jump and dunk it, right?
Yeah.
And the jump was hard. Catching the ball was hard. Trying to dunk it through the hoop was hard. And I'm still trying to dunk the ball through the hoop.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't even be in the game if it wasn't for him.
100%.
You know? And to me, I think all immigrants, we have that story of like I said, like this period in time where we decided, or our parents decided, we can't stay here, we have to leave. You make the decision to leave, not knowing where you're going to go.
Yeah.
You end up in a country that's not yours. You don't know anyone. And you have to try and make something of yourself.
Yeah, man.
That's hard. It's really hard.
It's really hard. And on the topic of having to achieve, it's a burden.
Oh, yeah.
It's a burden and a gift, obviously, because you're playing on a field where you can achieve, at least.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what are you achieving when bombs are being dropped on you, you know? Mm-hmm. So just having a shot at it. But I can imagine, and I'm not blaming your dad or my dad or the older generation dads, where your dad has seen some shit.
Oh, yeah.
So he's probably not the type of guy that is crying in front of people or vulnerable or communicating openly. And this is the type of guy who's maybe like a 5 a.m. type of guy, come back and no complaining. And yet sometimes you have the weakness of the strength, the shadow of the strength.
Oh, I could never live up to that.
So basically, and I feel that too in myself, and you probably too, because what I've discovered, and last year I went through a tough crisis, I would say, in terms of probably mental health and emotionally, where I realized that through most of my life I was in survival mode because, and I'm not complaining about my life, but basically, and I know I'm very lucky and very grateful, but my parents divorced when I was 6. Then my dad moved to another country. When I was 10, I moved with him to El Salvador and my stepmom and my sisters. That's a new school. First of all, in Costa Rica, it was a Peruvian household, so I felt Costa Rican, but I wasn't really Costa Rican. So then I moved to El Salvador when I was 10. That's new school, new friends, new family, new everything. Then I still go back to see my mom, back and forth to see my dad. Then at age 14, I moved to Mexico. New school, new everything, new friends. And I'm to a certain degree, I'm loving these challenges, but they're still hard on a 10 or a 6-year-old or a 14-year-old. 15, then I have the opportunity to go to boarding school in Quebec, and I love it. I play sports. It's a lot of kids like my age whose parents move around a lot, and there's soccer, there's rugby. It's really, really cool. Then at age 18, I go to U of T here in the University of Toronto. And then it's like, obviously, you got to paying international student fees. I got to make it, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Like, my dad's not paying for, it's like an incredible effort so that I could be here.
Yeah.
So I graduated in 4 years. Probably one of the only people that I know around in my friends or whatever. And then Scotiabank. Now I have to get a job.
Yes.
First of all, I was one of the only ones who didn't have a job when I graduated. I had no network. I applied to like a bajillion jobs, got 0 interviews. finally I got an interview because of an alumni of my boarding school here in Toronto. Anyways, then I get a job internship at Scotiabank. I have to get this job, otherwise I can't stay.
Right.
Because the postgraduate work permit, you have it, but you have to work in something related to what you studied.
Yep.
Otherwise, you can't apply for permanent residence, and then you have to fuck off, and you can't stay in Canada.
Yeah.
So I get this. I bust my ass off. I get to be a manager.
Wow.
Like at age 23 or 24 or whatever. 8 months after I joined as an intern. And there was 6 of us. All of them had like masters and jobs lined up right after the internship. I think they were sorry for me. I was the only one left. They gave me the manager. I fucking bust my ass off for like 3-4 years. I become a senior manager, one of the youngest ones in Scotiabank. And then in 2017, I finally feel like I have a shot at doing what I love for the rest of my life, which is comedy. So I quit that. Now the biggest chip on my shoulder. I better fucking make this.
You better.
I quit at the other thing that was like the dream job. Like I was the golden boy of my family, you know.
Right.
And now I already applied for citizenship right like a day before I quit the bank.
Wow.
So I can stay, but now I gotta fight to put bread on the table if I want to get married, if I ever want to have kids. And now last year, after working with you and started to work with Cody, after 5 years after I quit, 4 or 5 years after I quit, I'm finally making more money than I used to make at the bank.
Let's go.
Let's fucking go. But the flip side of that is, after, not necessarily 34 years, but 25, 30 years of being in survival mode, killing tigers because nobody's gonna save me. I gotta save myself. Gotta work hard. I gotta put my head down. I gotta do everything possible to be able to. Now there's no more tigers, and I fucking lost it. I was crying. Like
What's your purpose?
Yeah, I didn't even know what was happening to me.
Yeah.
I'm like, I came to the door. I just burst out crying.
Wow.
I was just but it was a period of days.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the fuck is happening to me, you know? Supposedly I have everything now. I have a wife that I love. I have an incredible kid who's healthy. And what is going on? So I started going to the psychology, going to therapy for the first time.
Good for you.
Through it, we discovered this, which is still one of the hypotheses. But I do subscribe to this one. Now, you go through this fucking insane journey, your dad and mom. Now there's no more tigers. And so what's there to conquer now?
Yeah.
What other challenges did your family have to go through in those years?
Oh, so I imagine what it was like for my dad and for my mom. You know, they're starting to learn English.
Yeah.
So they're starting to understand Canadian culture, right? And we had, my parents were strict because imagine you take this crazy journey, right?
Yeah.
And you arrive at this country, you're not going to let outside influences affect these kids, right? So I don't remember really having friends until like high school. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't allowed to go out and play with kids. It was like come home, the teacher would give us like, you know, the math problems you get in like grade 5 or grade 6, and they would say, okay, do questions 1, 2, 3. My dad was like, okay, do all the questions. You know, like it was like whatever is the minimum, you're going to do more than that. And you're going to not be affected by outside influences. So we had strict parents because they were terrified, right?
Yeah.
They don't want us to, and there was a lot of people like in the community, you know, other Kurdish families where the kids were starting to go astray, getting involved in gangs and drugs and all this other shit.
So this is happening in London. There's gangs.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Well, I think every poor area, and if there's a low-income neighborhood, there's going to be people that are going to be the same age that are going to congregate, and they're going to go and fight other kids from other neighborhoods. They're going to try and control drugs. They're going to try and control different things. So.
But it's crazy. A lot of our listeners who may not be in Canada, they're like, Canada is amazing. There's no gangs there. There's no poverty.
In the nice neighborhoods, it's beautiful. It's beautiful in the nice neighborhoods. In the poor areas, I had a bike. I remember I wanted a bike so bad when I was a kid. I wanted a bike so bad. We didn't have money, right? So we went to a garage sale. I think my dad bought a bike. It was I swear it was like a salmon color, not pink, but salmon,
Yeah.
you know? And I rode that bike. I was so proud to have that bike. 4 days after I got the bike, it was stolen.
Oh my God.
And my dad blamed me. Of course he did, right? Because in his mind, like, oh, you didn't take care of something I got for you. That's it. You don't get another one, right? But it's tough because, like, when you come to this country, if you're not coming here with a degree,
Yeah.
there's no good job you can get, right? My dad was a cab driver. My mom didn't work until I was in high school, right? She worked at a bakery, right? So these aren't high paying jobs. These are low income jobs, right?
Yeah.
So it was always uphill for us. But I remember my dad said to me, he always say, accept your reality, right? So whatever's going on, you have to accept it, right? And he always just say Haiti, Haiti, which in my language means little by little.
Haiti.
Whatever it is that you're after, little by little. And imagine, like, the journey that we had to come to Canada, right? For him, in his mind, he's just saying to himself, little by little, got to get to the border town, got to get over the border, got to get to the other border town, got to meet up with the smugglers, got to get to the UN offices, got to negotiate somehow to get to Canada, got to take care of my family while I'm waiting for that, got to get to Canada, got to feed them for years until they get to high school. Hopefully they get a good education. Hopefully they get good grades so they can go to university. All this is weighing on my dad's mind every day. And he used to always say, little by little, little by little.
Haiti.
Haiti. We're not going to get there tomorrow, but we'll get there. As long as
Continual growth.
And that's like a lot of the concepts around continual growth, even around like my whole coaching philosophy, Move the Needle.
Yes.
It's all built around this concept of just little by little, tiny baby steps. You know, there's a book that I read. I forget what it was called. I think it's called The Man, the Horse, and the Fox, or something like that. But in the story, the man is on the horse going through the woods, and it's really foggy. He can't see in front of him. And he says to the horse, I don't know where to go. I can't see in front of me. What direction are we supposed to go? And the horse says to the man, can you see the 1 foot in front of you? Just 1 step in front of you. And he said, yeah, I can see that. And he said, okay, take that step. And then do it again. And then do it again. And that concept of just baby steps to try and get to a destination that in your mind is better than what it is today. Whether that's a goal, a part of the world,
Yeah.
you know, family dynamics, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish in this life, whatever it is that you're after, if you can have a clear vision of what that is, and you know exactly the steps to get there, you can't take all the steps today or tomorrow, but you can take the one in front of you. And if you keep that mindset over and over and over, you will get further ahead than you are today. Are you going to make it to your destination? Time will tell. Right?
Haiti.
But Haiti, you'll get there.
And I know that your dad ended up going back.
Mm-hmm.
What year was that? And did he ever go back to battle?
No, so this is where it gets, some of the story gets a little bit tragic in the way that things have happened, right? I'm now 17, 18 years old.
Yeah.
I'm starting to feel like my own man, right?
Yeah.
I'm starting to make my own money. I'm working a job. You're not going to tell me what to do anymore, man. Right? I'm a rebellious teenager,
Yeah.
right? Young adult man. And we got into friction a lot. And I remember I went to university, and he would try and tell me that I couldn't go out, that I couldn't talk to girls. I had to study every day.
What university? What did you study?
I went to Brock University in Niagara, and I studied finance,
Okay.
which you have 2 choices when you come to Canada to be a like you have 3 choices. You have 1, be an engineer, be a doctor, or get a master's in business.
Yeah.
Right? That's the only 3 choices, right?
Those are the only things that they can brag about back home.
100%. And so I was at university, and we started to bump heads a little bit. He started to get into some friction with my mom. Because remember now,
how are you bumping heads if you're in Niagara and he's in London?
he would talk to the men in Niagara that he knew. And they were also cab drivers.
What?
Right? And he would say to them, like, keep an eye on him. He's in your city. Keep an eye on him. Yeah. And I'm like, fuck you, man. Like, I'm trying to build my own identity. I'm trying to make it out in this country. Why you got eyes on me, right?
Oh,
so we would bump heads. And remember that thing you were talking about where, like, you reach a point where, like, you've accomplished your goal.
Yeah.
You've killed all the tigers. You've slayed all the demons. You've made it to the mountaintop, right? There was a point where my dad was like, okay, my oldest son is now in university.
Yeah.
My next son just got accepted to university, and the 3rd son is on his way. right? He was in like grade 10 or 11. He was on his way to getting into university as well. So he felt like he made it, right? And him and my mom started to get into some conflict because they weren't in survival mode anymore.
Yeah.
They weren't trying to get to this goal of getting these kids a good education. They did it, right? So now conflict started to arise. And my dad said, okay, you know what? I'm going to go back home. So he went back home, and it was 2007 at this time. 2007, 2008. I was in my second year of university. He went back, and he served in the army as a translator. So with the Iraqi army facing ISIS at the time, if you remember. This was 2010, 2011. ISIS started to show up. So the U.S. Army was there. The Canadian Army was there. My dad spoke English, Turkish, Kurdish, Farsi, Arabic. Spoke 5 languages, right? Right. So he was like a Swiss Army knife. Anybody he needed to translate, he would be there, right? So he was serving in a different capacity.
Drivers on the ISIS side. Yo, what's going on that side?
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, right.
Watch these guys.
Yeah, man. So he went back home, and
your dad's probably the kind of person who would never use a GPS because he knows better.
He would say, I wrote GPS. You know? So, but for him, like when he went back home, him and I kind of fell out. We didn't talk for almost 9-10 years.
What?
Yeah, we didn't talk for almost 10 years. Because I resented the fact that he left. Right?
Yeah.
He left. I'm like, so who's gonna take care of my mom? Oh, I guess I'm the oldest son. That's on me now. So I'm trying to get a degree in finance in Canada. I'm discovering girls. I'm discovering partying. I'm trying to be responsible at the same time. I have all these plates that I'm trying to juggle.
And I'm like the man of the house.
I'm like, it's because of you. So we didn't talk for like 10 years. And then one of my friends, her dad passed away. It was 2016. Her dad passed away. And I knew her dad really well. And I went to the funeral, and she gave me a hug, and I gave her a hug, and obviously consoled her as much as I could. But she said to me, I know you haven't talked to your dad in 10 years. Just call him. Just call him. Right?
Wow.
And I called him. It was 2016. I called him. 2017, I went and met up with him for 9 days.
What was that call like?
It was like talking to a stranger.
No way.
Because remember now, like, I'm an adult. I'm 26 years old now, 27.
Or do you talk in Kurdish to him or in English?
Kurdish and English. A lot of Kurdish, but sometimes I'll struggle and I'll have to speak in English, but a lot of Kurdish. And
at home, did he speak Kurdish to the both of you?
Only Kurdish. We weren't allowed to speak any other language at home. Yeah, that's how the mastery of the language that I have is because he made a rule. Like, that's your mother tongue. You're not going to forget your language. And remember, one of the first things my dad said to me when I was a child is, don't forget the journey that we went on, and don't forget your last name. And the whole point of don't forget your last name is, remember, you're in Canada, you're going to become a citizen, and I was at the time, but you're Kurdish.
Yeah.
You're a very special breed in this world, right? It's a different identity, right? And he never want us to forget that identity. So
you called him up?
I called him up, and he was like, hello. And I'm like, hey. And it was like, like a first date? It's awkward. You don't even know what to ask. What do you say?
Yeah.
It was strange. It was like talking to a man that I didn't know, right?
Yeah.
Because in my mind, he was this strict dictator father growing up that I didn't know.
And he doesn't communicate. He's not vulnerable.
Vulnerability is not a word that exists in his vocabulary, right? And remember, growing up, he worked 12-hour days, 7 days a week. I swear, I think my dad in my whole life took maybe 5 days off. I've never seen.
You guys never took vacation?
We never took vacation. We took one vacation to Marine Land once. Right? Once. So I never really saw him growing up. Like, I didn't really know him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that presented an opportunity for me as an adult because I got to talk to him. I got to understand his mentality, the way he operates, the world that he grew up in, his mindset day to day. And I realized that a lot of the things that I am, the person that I am today, I'm molded after him.
100%.
You know what I mean? I'm the more refined, evolved version of who he is. Where emotions were like not a thing that he ever tapped into.
Do you ever feel guilty for taking vacation?
I used to.
Yeah.
I used to. Even to this day, like
Me too.
Days off.
I gotta focus. Focus to be like, okay, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, let's enjoy this.
Yeah.
You're allowed to.
And because there's that guilt.
Yeah.
You feel this like, if I don't work, I'm taking time off. That's allowed. This is okay. And for a lot of immigrants too, and we were talking about this off air, but we send money back home.
Yeah.
We all send money back home. So if we don't work, that's money that we're not making that we could send back home.
The opportunity cost.
The opportunity cost is like, do I have fun and enjoy my life, or do I work so that families can eat and take care of their kids and send their kids to schools? That's a hard bargain to have with yourself, right?
Yeah.
But there's a point where you have to realize that, like you said earlier too, like immigrants, we have this like weird identity, right? Part of us is back home, part of us is here,
man.
right? And we never feel like, we never truly feel at home. Like even to this day, I still don't, like I'm Canadian, my passport's Canadian, but my name is Zana Amin. Anywhere I show up in the world, I'm not John Smith from Woodstock, Ontario, you know? I'm that name. I'm a Middle Eastern looking man. My face generally is not pleasant, you know? I'm not always laughing and smiling. It's a straight face. So I look a little bit rough around the edges. So I've always had this like weird, confusing self-identity that I never could connect with, right?
Yeah.
But as an adult, and going to therapy is really helpful. But again, that's something that you can't do until you make money. So it's hard.
Also, back home,
it's not a thing.
That thing. Sometimes people confuse it as weakness. Like,
oh yeah.
Because you have to ask for help.
Oh yeah.
So, I feel one of the reasons why I quit my job, and it really, because you don't quit your job back home, your bank job back home to fucking do comedy, to tell jokes.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. So the one thing that helped me is, okay, what is happening here? And apart from many different arguments, one of the things that helped me was thinking, why did your dad do that? Why did my dad do that? Our family sacrificed so that we could follow our dreams, because they couldn't. Because they had to sacrifice so much in a world where the Second World War had happened right before they were born or when they were born.
Yep.
War-torn countries. There was terrorism in Peru. Corruption. All these things. And they were parents very young.
Yes.
My mom was a mom like when she was 19, and your mom as well, like 20 or whatever. So, and 2 kids. My mom too.
Yeah.
So the thing is, they didn't even have the option of dreaming. Like, my dad would have been a veterinarian, or would have bred horses or dogs. I mean, he ended up doing it later. But so my mom didn't get a career.
Right.
She was an artist, and she ended up being successful at it. But women didn't get to have careers in Peru in the 60s. You know.
Right.
So I'm like, the reason why they sacrifice so much is so that we could follow our dreams.
That's right.
And if comedy is part of my dreams, then I'm going to pursue that.
Hell yeah.
So, and if, I mean, I hope to be able to give Liam an education where he doesn't feel like everything's fucking for granted, you know?
Right.
But then again, dude, do I want to have a spoiled kid in one of the best countries? I mean, I know I'm talking about extremes, but I'd rather have him here than in a war. I mean, I know Costa Rica's not war torn, but you get what I mean.
Yeah.
And it's the education, it's the communication, and the values that you're gonna instill, and then he'll hopefully instill those into his family. But I want to go back to the call. That was awkward, like a first date.
Yeah.
Then you decide, because I remember this.
Yes.
I met you in 2015 at the gym.
Yes.
2017, you go and visit him in Kurdistan.
Yes.
And your family.
Yes.
I remember seeing crazy pictures of you, like in the border of like a battlefield with generals and people in battle. What was this like?
So I showed up. This was 2017. You know, I'm an adult now. I hadn't seen or spoken to my dad in like 10 years. I just started talking to him again. So when I arrived, it was like it was like this like distant family member coming back home.
Yeah.
I didn't know anyone. They knew me. I didn't know them. Right? I'm the cousin that's in Canada.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm meeting these people for the first time that are my family, that are my cousins. I'm meeting these, like, my cousins are all Peshmergas. They're all soldiers in the army now.
You would have been that.
I would have been.
Sure.
For sure. And at that time, ISIS was just starting to finish, like become not so much of a threat, right?
Yeah.
But still very much a threat. And when I showed up, I think one of the first things that I did, I kissed my dad's hand. And back home, this is like a very big sign of respect. You kiss the other side of the man's hand or the person's hand, and you touch it to your forehead. And this is like a sign of respect, right? And I did that for my father, right? And remember, my dad hadn't seen me in 10 years. The last time he saw me was like in glimpses of like in high school. He would see me at night for 5 minutes and then go back to work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we didn't really know each other.
You're
I'm a big dude.
big dude.
Yeah, I was in peak condition. I was tatted up, right? And
He hadn't seen you with any tattoos?
he hadn't seen me with tattoos. It was my first time seeing them.
You were probably
I was shitting bricks. I'm like, fuck, this guy's going to tear my head off when he sees these tattoos. Yeah. Oh, because
Peshmergas don't get tattoos?
they do now, but back then it was like you don't tarnish your body. Your body's a temple. How can you do that? This is Islamic culture, right? So these things aren't allowed, right? So I remember my dad and I went for this long walk. The first night that I got there, a long walk. And we just started talking. He's like, look, man, I want to get to know you. And I was like, oh shit, this is like it's like an exam, like at the final boss. You know what I mean?
Mufasa and Simba.
You know what I mean? So I'm like, shit, I hope I don't let this guy down. Like, he's like, what degree did you get? Oh, I got a degree in finance. What job do you have? And at the time I was entrepreneur life. Similar to you, I left a job. I was making 6 figures.
Yeah.
Project manager. I was doing great. I'm like, I'm gonna go open gyms. Right? So at the time I was doing the gym thing, and I think we had just gotten up to our 2nd gym at the time and on track for our 3rd one. And I'm telling him this, and I had another business with my boy Blanca that we were doing really well on financially. And I'm telling him all these things, and he's like, that's good. That's good. Who are you though? And I'm like, what do you mean? Who am I? I just told you all the things that I've done. And he's like, I didn't raise you to achieve accomplishments. I raised you to become a better man.
What?
And I was like, what? I didn't know you even talk like that. I thought it was like goals, achieve goals, become successful. That's the only thing that I was allowed to do in this life. I didn't know I could become a better person. Yeah. And he was like, you know, talk to me about your views on like values. Talk to me about, you know, how you perceive the world. Talk to me about your views on politics. Talk to me about your views on humanity in general. And we would have these like long philosophical talks, right?
In English and
in English and Kurdish, back and forth, right? And the first night that I was there, we talked for like 4 hours, right? And it was so illuminating for me, because I was like, I've read a lot of books on philosophy, you know, Friedrich Nietzsche and Socrates, and going back to Plato times, and like Stoicism is a big philosophy that I believe in. And I would talk about these things with him, and he's like, I know these things.
What?
I'm like, what?
Probably in 4 hours. You met him more than in 27 years.
Oh, 100%. And then I realized, I'm like, we're the same guy. We're the same dude. The more I started to talk to him, the more I was like, we're the same dude. I'm just a little bit more refined, you know?
Yeah.
Like in his world, women didn't have jobs, right? So for him, he was progressive in compared to other men back there, but still not quite there yet, right? Whereas I'm the more progressive version, right? And we would talk about, you know, like he's like, when things get hard, how do you navigate them? And I'm like, I remember something you told me when I was a kid, Hedi. And he's like, that's right. Never forget, little by little, you can accomplish anything in this life. And this is coming from a man that was no paperwork, refugee, war soldier. Somehow in his mind decided, you know what, I'm going to leave here and figure out a way to get my family to Canada, right? So in his mind, anything is possible.
Did you ask him about that journey?
Oh, and then, so I'd heard snippets of the story, but not the full story.
Everything you told me now is that
night.
Wow.
And I took notes on my phone while he was telling me the story, because it was just like the way that you were reacting, like wow. I was like, what? You're insane. How could you do this?
What was his demeanor like? It was just like
matter of fact. Yeah, I got arrested 3 days. I got tortured. And I'm like, were you scared? And he's like, why would I be scared? What would fear do? And I'm like, what do you mean? That's a natural reaction. You're in a deadly situation. You're scary. And he's like, no, I accepted my reality. every step along the way, I accepted my reality. Good, bad, ugly, doesn't matter. I accepted it. And because I accepted it, I could do something about it. And that mindset of doing something about it, heidi, little by little, it's how he navigated every single obstacle. You know what I mean? And then I realized, I'm like, the concept for continual growth was drilled into my head ever since I was a child. Move the needle is literally my philosophy of life, and I got it from this man, right?
Yeah.
And that to me was like, it was kind of like a full circle moment where I was like, okay, I'm gonna tell the lessons of this man and the insane risks that he took, the sacrifices that he took for this family, for us, because it's important.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to appreciate how you can accomplish more than what you think in this life. You just have to go for it.
Were you able to have a conversation apart from the kissing the hand, or thanking him and acknowledging him and your uncles maybe for the sacrifice that they did to defend Kurdistan?
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
continued to do.
Oh yeah, I remember I was
It
sitting.
seems like it's one of the only lands of the region that has never been penetrated or something, like.
Yeah, like well fortified, right? Because you're trying to overcome your enemies are trying to overcome Kurdish men as Peshmergas, and women were Peshmergas too, by the way.
Okay.
But these men, their identity is, I face death.
Wow.
They're not afraid to die. It's hard to overcome an enemy that's not afraid to die.
That's insane.
There's no running. There's no backing down. Doesn't matter if your opponent has tanks and you have rocks. You face the tanks.
That's incredible.
You know? And I remember when I was sitting around with all the cousins and the uncles, I got emotional because these are all hardened men. Still to this day, they're fighting ISIS, right? And
Now?
Well, ISIS no more, is gone.
Yeah.
But at that time, 2017, it was still a problem. And I was getting emotional. I was crying to my cousins and my uncles, and they're like, no. If you were here, you would be one of us. But because you're not here, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to do.
Wow, man, that's like.
And that weight fell off me, right? Because I had this burden on me that, like, how can I look myself in the mirror and, like, complain about a tough day when I'm trying to get emails out or get on these calls and my cousins are fighting ISIS? Like, it was hard for me to navigate reality. But when they gave me that release, it was like, oh, okay, all right. I'm not a piece of shit for not being a soldier here. I didn't have a choice. I was a baby when I was brought here.
Man, that's so tough to navigate. Because I still, when I go back home to Costa Rica and see my brothers and nieces, or to Peru to see my uncles and cousins and grandparents, there's a part of me, I still don't know how to navigate it or balance it or even verbalize it, if that's a word, where I'm like, this would have been my life.
Yep.
And I'm not here. Even though I didn't want to, and I didn't ask to, I left.
Yes.
And that's fucking hard to juggle.
Yes.
I know that I didn't choose to leave
Yes.
Peru, because I was actually born in Costa Rica. My parents left. But I did decide to leave Costa Rica to go to El Salvador. I didn't choose to go to Mexico because I just went with my parents. But I did choose to go to boarding school. And I did continue to choose to stay in Canada.
Yeah.
And to see your family develop and the time go, like, kids and birthdays and barbecues and whatever, and you're not there.
Yeah.
And life is still going without you.
Yep.
And you're here. And you're like, fuck, like, we've evolved as tribes, and I'm not there for my tribe. You know, it's fucked up. I don't even know how to explain it.
It's something only immigrants would understand, because you're right. Like, life did go on. Those people, that community that I would have been a part of, did grow.
Yeah.
And they had each other's backs, and they looked out for one another, right? We didn't get to be a part of that because we're in this part of the world. And who is our tribe here?
Yeah.
Other immigrants. You know, like, local Canadian people, they're nice. They're incredibly nice people.
Yeah.
But they don't understand our struggles.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's why like, every immigrant I know is friends with lots of immigrants from all over the world. And we all speak different languages, different religions, different cultures. But there's this, like, uniting identity that it's like we don't have anybody else here. We only have each other. So when we go back to our countries, for us it's incredibly difficult because we're looking at a life that we were supposed to live that we don't live, right? And generally, for most immigrants, especially if you live in Canada, you're going back to a place that, like, they may not have running water, they may not have power 24/7, they may not have a lot of the things that we take for granted in this part of the world might not be there yet, right?
Yeah.
So you're going and you can't quite connect with this reality that was supposed to be your reality.
Totally.
And in the eyes of every family member, they look at you. There's this like love that they have for you, but also this slight little bit of envy. I wish I was him. I wish I got to live the life that he's living. And in your mind, you're like, I wish I could live your life.
Yes.
You don't know how special it is for you to be around family.
Yeah.
Like growing up here, holidays it was just a day, right?
Yeah, it was
if
just
Christmas
a day.
was on Wednesday, it was a Wednesday. It wasn't Christmas. We didn't have celebrations. Who do we celebrate with? And we didn't have money to celebrate anyways, right?
You're just gonna have the same dinner with the same people that you had dinner yesterday.
Exactly.
Which is with a turkey, but turkey's not part of your culture.
No, exactly.
The best I can explain it is, you know, this like, just try to picture this. You've seen it. Indian guy that was adopted by a white family in North America.
Yeah.
And you know that they love the Indian baby.
Oh, yeah.
And the Indian baby is incredibly grateful to the white family for adopting him. But that Indian baby knows that his family is back in India.
Yes.
And he something happened that he's grateful for these opportunities, but he doesn't fucking belong in that white neighborhood.
Yeah.
And it's so fucking hard to, or you're still grateful for it, but it still fucks you up.
Oh, yeah.
And the other thing is, like, I don't even, like a video game. Let's say that it's like a Power Rangers video game, and you take a Power Ranger and you put him in a Mario Kart video game. It's not your fucking video game.
Yeah.
But you're still playing, you're gonna kill it.
And you could have a good time.
And you could have a great time.
Yeah.
And you're grateful for it. But you're like, fuck, man. On that other side, those Power Rangers are killing it without me. I would have been there.
Yeah.
Or maybe not even killing it. They're battling without me. They're suffering. I mean, it's just so fucked up to explain. I don't even know how to explain it, but it's a life that I'm extremely grateful for. But in our evolved nature, there are bonds that you can't replace.
That's right.
It's like it's your tribe. It's like blood. I don't even know what it is. And you can't replace. Now the flip side is sometimes you're with those people and you're like, fuck you guys. That's why.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why are we family? I don't even know. And then you get into all these arguments with your family, but that's what families do, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
I'd still want to be with them all the time, you know. Then again, Haiti. Like,
yeah.
The thing is, I spent so many years here saying, the second I get my Canadian passport, I'm fucking going back to Costa Rica. And then I got it and I never went back, partly because I met my wife and my son, now we have a son. But what I was trying to get at is, all these years, in my mind, I'm like, the second it was just, I'm going back to Costa Rica. So my Facebook, my Instagram, at my mind, every vacation was going to Costa Rica. Then 18 years went by, 15, 17 years went by, me in Canada, but my mind was in Costa Rica. So I wasn't neither here nor there. And last October, mainly when I got the crisis, I was like, it's my birthday. I'm gonna go with my wife and my son, my business partner and his girlfriend, and we're gonna go to Halifax. I want to get to know Canada. 'Cause all I knew was Montreal and Toronto.
Right.
17 years in Canada. All I knew was Montreal and Toronto.
That's where immigrants live.
Exactly. So, and where I lived. So, I'm like, this is the epitome of not being present.
Right.
and it's draining.
It is.
So I made that decision, and little by little, Haiti, I'm more comfortable with what I got right now. Before we close this off, I want to ask you, how's your mom? And what's her take on everything that happened? Is she like, I want to go back? Is she like, this is my home now? Is she like, I was too young to be a mother? Is she like, I'm grateful to be here? What's her take on everything?
Yeah, I wondered that too, because when I came back after connecting with my dad and hearing the story, I'm like, I got to hear my mom's perspective on this, right?
Yeah.
And I was closer to my mom growing up. So I asked her about it, and it's like that part of the journey doesn't register for her. It was such a traumatic experience for her, right? She's being ripped from her family by this man that she just married.
Wow.
Through an arranged marriage, remember?
Arranged?
This is Middle East back 25, 30 years ago. There was no selecting your partner. It was arranged. So she got arranged to this man who's 11, 12 years older than her.
So she's probably, I didn't even sign up for this.
I didn't sign up for this. I right away, 2 kids. I have children, babies, and a toddler. And this man says we're leaving during a war?
And
with no plan?
Discussion.
Yeah, with no plan. There was not we're going to show up at the airport, arrive, and it's going to be good. No, it's...
Grab a couple coffees.
Yeah, we're going to be fine. No worries. No, this is a giant gamble, giant risk, right? So for her, it's a very traumatic experience. And I think for her, over the years, she started to love this country and connect with it, right? But there's a part of her that always wants to go back. She goes back every year or two and spends like 5-6 weeks there, and me and my bros, we take care of her flight, we take care of her accommodations, we make sure she's good there.
She goes back
once every 2 years. Yeah, one or 2 years she's always back. She's probably going to go back permanently soon. And for us, like as the children, like, we take pride in being able to give her a lot of the joys that we didn't get, right? Like I remember when I got my first real job, the first thing I did, I took my mom, we went to a Hyundai dealership, and I signed for a brand new car, and she drove it off the lot. Now, she's only driven shit cars her whole life in Canada, right? Immigrant. Poor, right?
So you bought her a car?
Bought her a car. Yeah.
What?
And that was a gift that I'm so happy to give her, And even since then, we've upgraded her car. She's driving, like, doing her thing. And even for my pops, too, like, after I came back, I always asked him, like, Dad, what's your dream? You never got to live your dream. What's your dream, He said, you kids, you guys are my dream. And I'm like, no, what was your dream, though? Like, what do you want to do before, your time comes to an end? Because it will come to an end, right? And he said, there's this mountain right outside of the city that we live in. I'd love to build a cottage up there, right? And I'm like, let's do it. Let's do it, right? So I think over the course of like 2 years, 3 years, I sent him close to 40, 50 grand. We built that house. And like my dad's dream came true. Like he always said, I'm going to die on this mountain. This is my dream come true. And sadly, he did die on that mountain. There was a tragic accident on the house near the end of finishing it. One of the walls collapsed on him.
No way.
And he was pinned underneath it for 3 hours. And I can imagine my dad thinking, I have to accept my reality. I'm pinned. Internal bleeding's happening, right? And he died, I think, 3 or 4 hours after that accident, right? But for me, one of the greatest things that I heard him say, and this was like 2 weeks before he died, we'd finished the house, everything's looking good. He sent me a video, he's all decked out, Kurdish gear, walking around the house, the garden. It's like, this is the house, we did it, it's beautiful. And he ended the video with like, probably the words that any immigrant wants to hear from their parent. And he said, I'm proud of you.
Oh my God.
That to me was like, we did it. Like he gave me the gift of this opportunity to come to this country, and I used that gift to give him his dream. And to me, for it to all come full circle, he did pass away last year, but that losing him is what drove me to come talk to you about this story.
Yeah, man.
And it's what's driving me to put this special together that we're going to work on and put out there, because every immigrant can see in the eyes of another immigrant, we are the same.
Yeah.
And if I can be the example of what's possible in this country, and I'm going to continue to Haiti, move the needle and try to become as successful as I can in this country, I'm going to lift as many immigrants as I can with me. And that's what you do with Melpin Standard. That's why we're so close.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I love what you do. You give people the gift of speaking publicly in a language that's not their first language.
Yeah.
Right? So to me, it's a miracle what you do. I think it's very special. I think even this podcast is incredible, the stories that you share. And for me to be here and spend some time with you, it's a gift, and I appreciate it. And I can't wait to do some more magic with you, bro.
What was your dad's name?
Rasul
Amin.
Rasul Amin.
Wow.
Which in Islam, you know, in Christianity you have Jesus. In Islam they have the Prophet Muhammad. But his actual name was Rasul.
Really?
Yeah, so my dad has the same name as the Prophet.
And your middle name is Mohammed.
And my middle name is, so in immigrant culture, you take on your dad's name as your middle name. So my name is Zana Rasul, and then my last name is Muhammad Amin.
Oh, your last name is Muhammad Amin?
Yes. So my legacy, like I am my dad's legacy in a lot of ways.
Incredible.
Yeah, and to me, it's what drives me every day. And I think there's a lot of power in knowing your story, because from that story, you can make magic happen.
Wow, man. I can't believe. Do you have that video?
Which one?
Of your dad in the house all decked up?
Yeah.
Oh, I want to see it.
I'll show it to you. Yeah, I
I
still watch it because I'm like, I can see in his face the joy, and he's, I think he's like
Full
65
circle,
years
man.
old. Yeah, and he's like in his mind, it's crazy to him that his oldest son helped him build a cottage on a mountain. You know. And one of the things that my dad used to always say to me,
and this is in Kurdish territory,
free. It's
Peshmerga.
They're not near here because this is like so a lot's changed in northern Iraq now. It's kind of like Quebec to Canada.
Okay.
What northern Iraq is to Iraq, right? We have our own kind of local government, local currency, all that kind of stuff. So things have evolved a lot, and there's power, there's water, there's things that make it a civilized society. And my dad used to always say, and he said it to me before he died, he's like, and it's an old quote, and I can't remember who said it, but the one who has understood the meaning of life is the one who plants trees knowing he'll never sit in their shade.
Oh my God.
And to me, that perfectly summarizes my dad, the sacrifices that he gave to me, but also like in a lot of ways, like that house that we built on the mountain, I haven't seen it with my own eyes. I helped him build that house. He remarried there, and he has 3 daughters that are my half-sisters.
Wow.
They live in that house. They live a good life, like a great life, right? I hope to one day go and see that house, but until I see that house, now I understand the concept of sacrificing for other people so that they can have things that you won't have. That to me is really what makes this all special.
What an incredible story, man. This is insane. I cannot believe that it came to full circle. In that mountain, I'm sorry of his passing.
I appreciate that.
And at the same time, I'm very happy that you were able to give him that joy.
Oh yeah. No, he died. He died knowing things are good. Like he could rest in peace. You know, we say, I hope that person rests in peace when they die. I know he can rest in peace. I know that when he was pinned underneath that wall and he knew that his life was leaving him.
Yeah.
It's okay. My kids are grown adults. This young family that he's got, he knows we're gonna hold them down. They're gonna grow up amongst their uncles and their cousins, and they're gonna have a great life. They're not gonna have to worry about $1 because I'm gonna make sure they never have to worry about it.
Yeah.
So for him, it's like he accomplished everything he could accomplish.
That's incredible.
And like you said, for it to come full circle and for his story to end the way that it does, is tragic, but also I think it's the springboard for me to now pass it on to the next generation.
Incredible. I'm speechless. my friends, Zana Amin and Stephan Dyer on the Stephan Dyer podcast. Ciao, ciao.
Peace.
Wow.
Gracias por escuchar el Stephan Dyer podcast. Arrivederci, my people.